Hello, and welcome back to Mad Mouse Games. There is lots of good advice out there for new DMs that are learning things. There's the things I wish I would have known when I first started DMing, and 10 tips for new DMs, and videos like that. But I think that the best DMs out there all have one thing in common, and that is they have learned how to assess themselves, their games, and they've learned how to use that assessment to improve. So, why should we assess our DMing? Well, let me demonstrate. Everybody starts at a different level as a DM. Some DMs start up here, maybe because they've been a player for a long time and had some good DMs. Maybe they've watched lots of tips and trick videos by bearded people on YouTube. Subscribe. Or they may just have natural skills at being a DM. Other DMs like myself start off kind of mediocre or maybe poorly, and that's okay. It's not about where we start, it's about where we go from there. Regardless of how good of a DM we are when we start, both ourselves and our players will get greater satisfaction out of the game if we're able to improve as a DM. If we stay on the same level as when we start, our players will see that. Would you want to keep playing with a DM who puts in minimal or no effort to improve their game? My theory is that as long as our players are seeing our effort, now that's an important word, effort, then I think they are willing to stick it out with us, even if we improve at a very slow pace. Also important to mention is progress is not linear. Once we start moving up, it doesn't mean we can't have failures or dips in our improvement. That's just how the game goes. So don't expect to only get better. You will have problems that arise at the game table, but if you're assessing your game, you will be better equipped to handle those issues. Let's take an example from my own DMing. I had DM'd about 4 sessions, and half of my players said that they wouldn't be able to make it to the upcoming session. So instead of canceling, I decided that the players who could come would have their own little side mission. The players were sent to a nearby bandit camp to see what they were up to, and I was still learning how to balance encounters and threw too many bandits at my players. This ended up with the players all being knocked unconscious, tied up, and left by said bandits. The players eventually freed themselves and wanted to chase the bandits down. So I started a chase. I tried to follow the DMG instructions and advice for running a chase, and it did not go well. It was boring, frustrating, and not fun for the players, partially because they had some bad rolls. And it was intimidating, unplanned, and horrible for me to run. Now, let's fast forward a little bit. Several months later, I look back on that session as probably the worst one I'd run up to that point, and I didn't want to do it again. So I decided to work on the things that went wrong. I determined there were problems with running balanced encounters, and I needed a better chase system that would be fun for me and for my players. I spent quite a bit of time thinking about how I was going to do it, and then putting that plan into action. The balancing encounters came mostly with practice and prepping better, not too difficult. However, the chase system took quite a bit of my time. I spent months finding time here and there to work on it when I wasn't spending time with my family, working, or doing other hobby things. However, one day I was ready to test my system, which I'll share in a separate video, so subscribe if that's something you want to see. So my players had made it to some dwarven mines. The mines were infested with alien-like creatures. And when I say alien, I mean like Alien, the movie Alien. Lots of fun. There was a group of dwarves, the Hammerkeen, who were basically dwarven Spartans who were protecting the Great Dwarven Forge on the far side of the mines. The monsters had taken over, and the dwarves did not have a good way of getting supplies to the Hammerkeen, and they were running dangerously low. So the players were recruited by the Dwarven Council to get supplies to the Hammerkeen. The players loaded up a horse cart with supplies, readied their spells and weapons, and then charged into the darkness. What ensued was a dramatic, fun, memorable chase. There were broken wheels, people falling off the cart, environmental hazards, and unique uses for skills and abilities. The players had a good time with it, and it was an enjoyable night for all. Fast forward another year. Yeah, I know, lots of time in the story. It's a long one, but it's worth it. We had taken a break from the campaign, and one of my players and I were talking, and he told me, "You know what was the thing that I enjoyed most in your game?" Inside, I was like, "I'm dying to know. I want to know what you liked." But I simply said, "No, what was your favorite thing?" My friend continued, "The chase through the Dwarven mines was my favorite session that we had. I loved how it worked and how we had to work together as a party to overcome the different obstacles and issues that came our way, and that blew me away. I had taken a failure and made it into a success. From that moment on, I wanted to make a video like this. I wanted other DMs to feel that joy and elation that I'd had from that moment. So, what is the process? Well, the first step is admitting that there is a problem, which means that there is also a solution. Something that I started doing was writing down one thing that went bad per session, or something that I wasn't happy with how it turned out, or a moment when I could tell my players were not having as much fun. To make myself feel better, I'd also write down one thing that went well. This is important, and we'll get to that in a moment. Let's put a little beep pin in that. As long as we are being aware of how the game is going and paying attention to what's good and what is not, that is the first step. If you struggle with this, then I have some more advice that I'll also put a pin in for just a moment. Once we know what the problem is, we need to dissect it to find out what the root of the problem is. Let's take an example. If you notice that your players seem not to like combat, then you need to see why. Is it too challenging? Not challenging enough? Do the bad guys always have tons of hit points? Are the characters always surprised by the bad guys? Does combat take a long time and need to be sped up? Are the players not paying attention? Is Theater of the Mind too confusing? Does it take forever to set up the miniatures and the mat? Are the encounters not balanced? Does the DM not know how the bad guys' abilities work? As you can see, in order to find the root of the problem, we must ask ourselves questions and answer them to get to the bottom of the issue. The hardest part about this is sometimes figuring out which questions to ask. Let's put a little pin in that for a second too. After we dissect the problem, we need to make goals to improve. Focus on a specific thing to make your goal. If your goal is too broad, like, I'm going to improve combat, then you're going to have a hard time doing it. But if you've already dissected the problem, then you can set a more specific goal, such as, I'm going to balance encounters according to the DMG every time I prep a session. A good goal like that specifies what we're going to accomplish and when we're going to do it. Then we just have to hold ourselves accountable to those goals. At the end of each session, I also started writing down how I did on my goal for that session. I also think it's important to focus on one goal at a time. If you spread yourself too thin and try to accomplish too much at once, then it might not be too good. You might find it difficult to keep up with each and every goal. But if you only have one goal, it's much easier to hold ourselves accountable to that until we make it a habit. Now, everyone can handle a different amount. Maybe when you first start out, you can only do maybe one goal at a time or two, but eventually maybe you'll be able to be working on 5 or 6 goals at a time. Find out what's comfortable for you and what you can accomplish. Now, let's get to the pin that I keep putting in. I think at any time in the process, we can get help from outside sources. And personally, the best source is our players. Our DMing affects them the most, and so they should have the biggest input into our DMing. If you're bad at being aware of what you do that's good or bad, ask your players. They can tell you. If you're having a hard time dissecting a problem to get to the root of the issue, ask your players. If you're having a hard time staying accountable to your goals, ask your players for help. The players in your game can be your greatest asset as a DM to help you improve, and it shows your players that you really care about the game. I think it's vitally important to hear from your players what they think of your game. Now, there are other sources out there that can help you. You can always go to Reddit, forums, Discords, YouTube, or any other number of places. Some will be more helpful than others. I'm always more than willing to help as well. I made a subreddit for this channel. It's r Mad Mouse Games, or r/Mad Mouse Games. You're more than welcome to go there and ask if there's something that you want to ask, and hopefully people, or maybe even myself, can give you some advice. But no matter where you're at in the process of improving, the D&D community is very, very friendly, at least from what I've seen, and they're willing to help you. Finally, the last step is just rinse and repeat this process until you're happy with your DMing and your players are happy with it, and you die. The constant improvement of our game will show our players how much the game means to us and that we are an investment worth putting their time into. We can also improve the things that we're good at. Earlier, I talked about how I wrote down one thing that I thought I did really well that session. Sometimes taking those good things, our strengths, and trying to improve on them will make our game even better as well. There's a saying that I've heard, it's good, better, best. If we're good at something, we can always make it better, and eventually we'll become the best at it. Although that's, long time down the road probably. The last thing that I want to say is that the price of improvement is time. You have to spend time assessing your game in order to improve. Lots of you may not have a lot of time, like myself. I mean, I haven't done anything on this channel in like a year. So, yeah, not a lot of time. However, finding 15 minutes after a session, or adding 15 minutes to your prepping to do these things, or taking 15 minutes to talk to your players will help you rapidly improve, even if you just do it in small increments. When I first started DMing, I was worried about all kinds of things that I thought would improve the game, like talking in character, having a story with great hooks, having a dynamic world the players could interact with, the politics of the regions, and about 500 other things. But having all those things to worry about did me little to no good. My improvement was very slow until I started focusing on things that went bad in my game and making goals and holding myself accountable to those goals. Then I started improving rapidly. Hopefully someone out there will find this video helpful. If you would do me a huge favor, if you have a system for the way that you improve your game or advice for DMs on how to improve, leave it down in the comments. If you want more advice, check the comments for things that may help you. And one day I'll probably use some of that advice in a video for you all. So there's that. Also, if you thought this was helpful or would like to see more videos like this, then hit that like button so I know it's something that you want to see, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and hope you have a wonderful day.